All right, hello everyone. I'm Moses Park. I'm the CEO and founder of Bisang Global, where we help companies soar to success. So what is Bisang Global? The gist of it is that we help Asian companies and Asian startups expand their business into the US. We provide them with business development help, also investment funding if they need funding, searching for future raises. And we also, through our partners, provide relocation services and visa support as well, also as legal services as well. Our goal is to not just be any marketing agency or any regular consultancy firm. We want to be, once we work with you, we want to be like your family member. We want to be your home away from home. Make sure that you feel comfortable when you come here into the States. We not only help Asian startups come into the US, we also help US companies expand their business into Asia as well. So we have received, we gotten 6 portfolio companies within the last 5 to 6 months. We're getting about 3 more in the next 2 months. And among these companies, we are helping generate about $55 million in revenue and helped raise $1 million so far. We are consistently helping them with business development, so we are actually looking forward to making those numbers much higher quite soon. And also our most recent company we're working with is SPAM, which is a US company that we're helping expand into Asia. That is pretty much all my presentation. I can talk more about the kind of events we do. We hold about 2 to 3 pitch events a year. You're more than welcome to come and join, win some prizes, pitch in front of judges and investors. If you have any questions about actually using our services, working with us, just feel free to contact me. Usually what we do is we take an equity stake in your company for helping you. So thank you. I'm Moses Park. Any questions at this time, feel free to ask. Nope. If not, please continue staying. All the other speakers are amazing and you will learn so much from them.
Alrighty, thank you, Moses. And our next speaker is Paul O'Brien. Paul has worked in venture capital economic development, serving investors and entrepreneurs for the better part of 25 years. With a passion for media innovation and investment, Paul seeded MediaTech Ventures, a media industry venture development group that created one of the world's leading startup programs. Former venture partner in the private equity group, Meaningful Ventures, O'Brien is a founder and director of Funded House and of the Founder Institute in Texas. His early career at Yahoo and HP witnessed the emergence of the internet and corporate digital transformation. And from there, Paul led the early growth of startups such as Outright.com, Zvents, and Microventures. He built website in the 90s and continues to engineer and produce content at seobrian.com. He was featured in the book Online Marketing Heroes and frequently speaks at startup and media conferences. And today he is speaking at our webinar. Paul?
Thank you, June. Good morning, everyone, and good evening from Austin, Texas. My name is Paul O'Brien. I'm going to share just a brief bit of insight to what we do at MediaTech Ventures and how we serve entrepreneurs, founders, startups, and businesses. And I'm going to be brief because what I really like to talk about more so is a bit of that history that I have and that we have working throughout the United States. Because as June shared at the beginning of the conversation and Moses shared a bit of perspective about what we're here to talk about tonight is why and how the United States, and in particular, perhaps through and with Texas. That's why I'm amongst these esteemed panelists, to give you some insight to Texas as a market and to give you some insight to funding and venture capital throughout the United States. If I can, first, let me share a bit of perspective about what MediaTech Ventures is about and why we're doing what we're doing. About 15 or 20 years ago, some economists witnessed the emergence of what's now called the creative class. There are a lot of different ways that the creative class is coined in our workforce. Our creative class is comprised of artists, it's comprised of software engineers, it's comprised of folks that work on different projects throughout the course of their career and have both technical and creative skill sets. That emergence was identified because at the same time, as we all know, we're seeing the decline of the demand in manufacturing, in our service industries, in our agriculture industries. And so what's notable about this shift is this recognition, this understanding that the internet and that idea of digital transformation that June introduced about myself is causing our entire workforce and our entire economy to become more creative and more technology-based. The question is, how do we serve them capably? How do we develop those workforces? And how do we help companies in that future of the way we work? We look at two distinct concepts in particular, and what we're pretty excited about is, as you can see here very briefly, these two distinct concepts are merging. Concept number one is this idea of that digital transformation that I mentioned. Digital transformation just means that every company in the world today needs to understand the internet all the way from the foundation of what they're doing, be that their accounting infrastructure, their finance infrastructure, to the top of what they're doing at the top of the funnel with regard to lead gen, customer adoption, marketing and promotions, and so forth. That digital transformation refers to how companies need to transform to be digital economies. And as you can see here, the enthusiasm for it really started around 2010, 2012. The convergence that we look at is that idea of the creative class and the future of work. Around the same time as the internet emerged, as I started my career at Yahoo, these two trends started to accelerate. And it's just recently, especially this year for reasons we're all familiar with, that the idea of a digital transformation exceeded the future of work. And now folks in venture capital and at the corporate level throughout companies and throughout the world are looking at what it means to transform and make sure they're completely digital companies. This slide is a little busy. It's a little busy on purpose. This is what MediaTech Ventures does. We're a holding company for venture development to help entrepreneurs and enable us to work both with public and private partners in a variety of different ways. On the right-hand side, you see our framework, and that's a little complicated, so I'll let you look at it, and I won't explain it in too much detail, but our framework is essentially that right in the middle, we focus on data. We focus on information, analytics, technology, CRMs. We focus on making sure that our industry, this workforce, these entrepreneurs have as much information as possible. We specialize on that outer circle, the media industry, hence MediaTech Ventures. And we focus on 5 pillars: real estate, platforms, education. You see it there. The reason we do that, as I've alluded, is that we have actionable intelligence. We have data about what you all are doing so that we can more capably move public, corporate, and private capital. We can make sure that that money gets to the entrepreneurs and the professionals who deserve it and need it most. A simpler way to think about what we do is on the left-hand side, that list of 5 bullet points. We focus in MediaTech Ventures on the people, your skill sets, the physical infrastructure as entrepreneurs and startups, the tools and resources that we all need, and promoting all of what works. That's us in a nutshell. We do it with a lot of different people. I'm going to breeze past this one only to give you a glimpse of the fact that we have a pretty diverse team spread out throughout the United States. You'll get a better sense for who these folks are when we share the slides. What you're looking at here is that we have people from Los Angeles to Chicago to Dallas to Austin. These people have worked in companies like LinkedIn, Samsung, Yahoo, Facebook, a great many of the major media companies and internet-based companies that we're all familiar with today. Our work, like I said, is a little bit different than a typical startup program. We're not just an incubator. We're not just an accelerator. Our work is actually found throughout many of the other programs that exist. As June mentioned, I'm one of the directors for what's called the Founder Institute, which is a program based in California that we brought to Texas. We're also pretty involved and heavily involved with companies like Techstars and Impact Hub and SKU. So as you get involved in what we're doing or want to reach out to us and explore more about what we're doing, we're going to introduce you to and make you familiar with those programs as well. On the right-hand side, you see some of the companies or brands that we have had a direct hand in developing. And it's a diverse set of companies on purpose. Collective is our incubator. Gamer Jibe is a virtual world for gamers. funded house is a venture capital experience that we produced during South by Southwest and other conferences, just as an example of some of the kinds of companies and the work and the brands and the products that we bring to market through what we're doing with entrepreneurs like yourselves. Let's shift gear and talk about investment in the United States. I like this very simple chart for one reason, and it's that I grew up in Michigan. And on the United States map at the top of the United States, you can see Michigan, and it's got a little overlay of Korea with the state of Michigan. And I love how those two regions of the world are roughly identical in size, because hopefully it gives us a good picture in our minds of what it means to scale in the United States and raise capital in the United States. You know, as we're all familiar with the United States, it's just a massive country. I grew up in that little state, little compared to Texas, little, but similar in size to where most of you are today and most of you are from. Michigan, when I grew up, was an economy that was suffering because it did not invest in innovation. It did not invest in education. Detroit, as we know, at that point was dying with regard to the auto industry, thanks in large part to the fact that Asia was investing heavily in education and manufacturing and innovation in that part of the world. So think of the United States as a matter of scale, because investing through and with and working in the United States is a matter of having that perspective in your mind. This is Silicon Valley. I went to Silicon Valley after I left Michigan, worked at Yahoo, which is near the bottom of this map. And I lived in San Francisco, where my kids were born, which is at the top of the map. And that's roughly 2 hours from end to end. And when most people think of Silicon Valley, they don't necessarily appreciate how massive Silicon Valley in fact is, and how and why there are so many technology companies and so much capital in that part of the world. The fact is, it's 4 major cities spread out across roughly 2 to 3 hours in every direction. I want you to keep that in mind, because now I've just shown you what Austin looks like. And I've purposely kept the map at the same scale, because if you've been to Austin, if you've been to South by Southwest, or you just have a picture of it in your mind, unfortunately, most people think of Austin as the little rectangle right in the middle of that map, right where that blue dot exists. The fact is, Austin, relative to Silicon Valley, is much, much more massive. San Marcos at the bottom of the map is Texas State, one of the most innovative education institutions in Texas. At the top of the map is Jarrell. And Jarrell, you'd probably not be familiar with, but I'm sure you've heard of Tesla. Tesla's manufacturing center in Texas is likely going to go right there in Jarrell. What's funny and amusing to me about Austin and how we talk about Texas and Austin and a company like Tesla, of course, is that Tesla is announcing the fact that they're going to be in Austin. The fact is they're roughly 2 hours north of Austin, quite a bit distant from Austin proper. That map, the scale of Austin, is a great way to appreciate how substantial this part of the world can actually be for what you're doing. Here's why. It's important when thinking about raising capital in the United States and thinking about what you're doing, it's important to appreciate where you're going to be and the history of where you're going to be and why. On the left, just for the sake of a simple example of it, appreciate that Silicon Valley has perpetuated upon industry after industry. The military helped develop radar. That led to the semiconductor, that led to the microwave, which led to the microchip, which led to the computer, which led to the internet, which led to the smartphone. Almost all of the work in Silicon Valley, all of the capital, and almost all of the innovation is tied to those distinct things. It is not the technology epicenter of the world, as you all in Korea certainly know, but it is a technology hub of the world for certain things, those certain things. Austin, of course, has a very different history. A little bit of it is based in the semiconductor and the internet, but it's also a much more substantial region given the government, given the military, given our proximity to energy, given the fact that we're a very artistic music industry and film industry, given the fact that there's a tremendous amount of enterprise software, and there's a tremendous amount of consumer packaged goods in this part of the world, as examples, historically speaking. And so when you've got those two perspectives about where you're going to be and why, what I also love introducing folks to is that investment in the United States is a matter of scale, because while you might consider coming through Austin and Texas with us, and you might consider the fact that Silicon Valley is important 2,000 miles away, what most companies rarely appreciate is that the great majority of companies in the United States incorporate in Delaware, which is on the other side of the map, another couple thousand miles away. Now, why? Why Delaware? Well, because the United States is so massive that the lawyers in the US and the investors in the US all tend to study and practice Delaware law for the sake of making things simple. I've never been to Delaware, but our companies all incorporate in Delaware for the simple fact that in order to raise capital here, it's a substantial consideration to make things simpler. What you also appreciate or need to appreciate is that given these different regions of the world, just in the United States, what happens is that founders and businesses and startups such as yours end up with subtly different valuations because of the costs of different regions. They end up with different market shares because you might be in a major part of the country or a minor part of the country. There's a natural tendency to think of market share differently. And venture capitalists in the US favor an understanding of your market share versus how many customers you have or how much growth you're having, because we're looking for things like your competitive advantage. We're looking for the fact that you've got a distinct segment of the market that you can own, you can develop, and you can translate into an exit. My fifth point. Venture capitalists in the United States generally are looking for an opportunity to exit. And so what does that look like in the case of what you're doing so that they can get the return on the investment that they're seeking? Now, I just covered a bunch of bullet points. These are the kind of things that we teach in the programs that we help develop. And these are the kind of things that help explain why we wanted to have this webinar with you all and why we wanted to introduce a bit of what we're doing and how we think in this part of the world. This, again, is our maps of Silicon Valley and Austin. And what I've done over that, on top of that, as you can see, is a different look at Austin. And I've done that on purpose. What I've done with this map is I put pinpoints for every major technology company and venture capital firm in Austin, Texas. And if you notice, it's hard to do in a brief presentation like this, but if you notice, the great majority of those things are not in downtown Austin, where it says Austin on the map. They're not in downtown Austin. So again, think in terms of scale and appreciate that in any region or city that you engage with in the United States, there's likely a lot more going on than is obvious. And I want you to conceive of that, not just given where you might be coming in through the United States, but I want you to appreciate how important that mindset towards scale is important for what you're doing. Here's why it's even more exciting for Texas and not just Austin. I've scaled out again. What you see where the 6 or 7 stars is Austin, Texas. That's the point on the map that I've been showing you as far as Austin is concerned. I scaled out, though, to show you San Antonio, Dallas, and Houston. The distance between Austin and San Antonio at the bottom of the map is the fastest growing metropolitan region in the United States. When I moved here 10 years ago, it was practically still just farmland and ranch land. 10 years later, they're putting skyscrapers up between here and San Antonio. If you want to be in a region of the world, if you want to be in a part of the country, the United States, that's booming, it's this part. And if you want to be in a region of the world and a part of the country that's not just booming, but it's continuing to get the attention of the United States, of investors throughout the United States, and frankly, the rest of the world, it's here. Because not only is it the fastest growing metropolitan region of the world, but Houston, that direction, and Dallas, up that way on the map, is also only a couple hours away. The brevity, the size and scope of Texas is not that substantial. And when you take those first lists that I shared with you of Silicon Valley versus Austin's history and actually blow them up to appreciate why Texas, you get a list that's a little bit more substantial and looks like this. Compared to Silicon Valley's specialization or New York's specialization in finance or the internet, respectively, a place like Texas has this to bring to bear. Space. And Houston and NASA, if you work in that industry. Of course, a tremendous amount of real estate and commercial property development. A lot of government work is done throughout Texas. A tremendous amount of education is done throughout Texas. A lot of data science is here because, by the way, the NSA, the National Security Administration for the Department of Defense, they're based down in San Antonio. So if you look at this map, you can appreciate how what's exciting about why there's so much attention on Texas is that Silicon Valley helped dawn this idea of the information age and this digital transformation that we're going through. Everything's shifting its attention to Texas, though, because we have the traditional industries here. And the transformation that's now occurring is what Silicon Valley built 20 years ago, having its impact on Texas, so that the traditional industries in which most of us work are finally adopting the internet at scale and starting to grow much more substantial companies that are global and support investors throughout the world. To take a look at that map of the United States again, and the size of Korea and the size of Michigan, what I love about that triangle of Dallas to San Antonio to Houston is that this region of the world is roughly the equivalent of Korea. And so it's going to be a very familiar experience as far as the region is concerned. And it gives us the presence to scale throughout the rest of the country, since we're effectively in the middle of it as far as the West Coast and the East Coast are concerned. Like I said, this is what we teach, and I'm wrapping up, so just a couple of more slides. This is what we teach in our program. We teach folks digital transformation. We teach folks how to raise capital in the United States, throughout the United States. We teach folks how to appreciate the vast differences in the different economies, the different industries that exist throughout the United States, so that we can help you figure out where to be and why. And we do that with three distinct focuses in our program through MediaTech Ventures. We focus on marketing first. We focus on developing what you're doing second, and then we focus on producing the company with you. And you can see some sub-bullet points that give you a little bit of a sense for the curriculum that we've developed for the startups that work with us and through the partners and companies that we work with to help develop them in this part of the world. We do that together. Hence my participation in this panel and with you all. We do that together. Like I said, we're a holding company. And so the way we develop, and the reason we work with so many different programs, is that we look to folks like Moses, who's joined us, and Ronald at Bisang Global, to develop our program on your behalf in this part of the world. And so I'm excited to share and work with these two gentlemen in Texas alongside of what we're doing. But we also do that in collaboration with companies, because like I said, we're not just focused on venture capital. We're not just focused on specific countries. We're not just focused on the incubation stage, but we work very closely with Microsoft. We work very closely with Hearst, Warner Music Group, Facebook, friends that we have at these other major companies, like I said, that are technology-based or internet-based, and looking for more opportunities to fund, participate, partner with, acquire, acqui-hire, frankly, with the businesses and companies like those that you've developed. Because we're looking to establish the fact that entrepreneurship and innovation is a collaboration between, again, public organizations, like our governments, like our education institutions, partnerships like what we're doing with Bisang Global, and then frankly, again, the companies that are also playing a significant role in what we do. And our focus, like I said, is always on scaling what you're doing through MediaTech Ventures, because this digital transformation that companies like these have gone through enable us to best appreciate what it means to not just build a product, not just sell a product or a service, but to fully embrace what the internet does for us and to scale up what we're doing to the likes of something like a Sony or a Universal Pictures or an ESPN, some of the major companies where we have some friendships and affiliations today to help you scale throughout the United States to the kind of scale that these kind of companies have achieved. With that, I'm finished. Again, my name is Paul O'Brien. I'll share my contact information in the chat so we can move forward pretty quickly. Again, I'm with MediaTech Ventures, and so thank you all very much. Love taking questions if we have some, or we can take them later. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul.
Paul, it seems like you have two questions. Could you introduce me to startups that you recently invested in? Could you introduce me to startup in case that you recently invested in case of entertainment industry?
Great question. So an important distinction is that we're referred to as a venture development group. We're not a venture capital fund. We built a data platform for the industry. We built an incubator and curriculum and platform that we develop startups with and through. We partner with other companies and private equity groups and venture capital firms. And I say that with that distinction to make sure it's clear. We do not fund companies. Our mission is to make sure that your companies are known to and connected to the venture capital firms that do. And so to do that, we help develop what you're doing. We help develop the promotion and the exposure of what you're doing. We help make sure that those investors, mentors in the industry, and founders such as yourself are all on a platform, a data platform that enables the investors to more capably find the things that are meaningful to them and make it easier to connect with and scale what you're doing through the investors that might have an interest in what you're doing. So so we haven't explicitly invested in companies, but I suppose I can only characterize it this way. There are good 50 or 60 venture capital firms throughout the United States that we work pretty closely with, and talk every other day or so, to keep them apprised of what's going on. We also produce one of the leading media industry newsletters, which we can make sure you get access to and subscribe to, or some such leading industry newsletters. It's a weekly update of all of the funding, all of the news, some of the major innovations every week. That's sent to a great majority of the venture capital firms and angel investors that we're affiliated with and familiar with. So a great way to connect to those folks is actually just through that news that we share as a media company.
Great. Another question. Recently, when I visited South by Southwest event, I could see that they focus on convergence technologies such as VR and AR rather than music. Can this also be seen as reflecting the investment environment and culture?
Reflecting the investment environment and culture is perhaps the wrong way to think about it. That instead think of it perhaps this way: that there are innovations that emerge along a curve, and at the very beginning of the curve, things like blockchain are still at the beginning of the curve. AR is still pretty early at the curve. At the very beginning of the curve, we see a lot of startups that fail. Frankly, right? This is the R&D stage of a new idea. We see a lot of startups that fail. We see more angel investment participation. We see more corporate R&D, corporate innovation participation, and we see less venture capital, frankly, because what we're seeing at that stage is that things are still being adopted. Virtual reality, frankly, is still to a great extent at that stage. The technology has emerged, but has it been adopted at scale by the market, by consumers? Not quite, right? We're still waiting for maybe glasses that are only this big and work as capably. And those are coming, as we can see, but they're not quite there yet. Versus music. Music, of course, has been around for centuries, thousands of years. And technology in music is much, much further along that adoption curve, right? We're already very familiar with Spotify and Amazon being able to play music in our home, and Sonos pumping music throughout what we're doing, or our televisions playing music. Right? Music innovation is as commonplace as anything, and so we do see a lot more corporate investment and venture capital investment in music tech as a comparable, since you brought it up, than we might yet in AR and VR. And it has nothing to do with whether or not those two things are meaningful. It really just has more to do with where they are in their stage of development, in their stage on this curve. Some other things are at the stage of being reinvented, like news, like advertising, right? We're very familiar with those industries. However, because of privacy, because of tracking capabilities, because of mobile devices, because of the scandals about fake news, which you may be familiar with, these industries have been around for a long time in media, but are in a sense back at the beginning of the curve as they explore new ways to do things. And so South by Southwest is exciting for us to be partners with and to be in proximity to, because the way to think about South by Southwest in that word convergence is really just the fact that it is film and music in a very broad sense, converging with technology and all that means, right? That means video games, that means film, that means immersive media, that means advertising, that means not just music, but other forms of entertainment, right? And all of the different ways that technology make that possible. VR and AR just being one of the ways that's going to transform the way we experience those things in the future.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. As you guys can see, Paul is what I consider one of the knowledgeable geniuses in the industry. So if you guys are interested in MediaTech Ventures program, feel free to contact me as well. I'll help you get connected and make sure you are within the right pipeline, right process in being part of MediaTech Ventures and letting them help you get investment, build out your company here in the US as well.